Yes, reason with grace. Okay, reason with grace. And the passage will be coming from Acts chapter 17, verses 16 through 31. And so if you have your Bibles, please open up to Acts chapter 17. If you don't, you could look up at the screen. All right. We got all our technology up and running today. Thank God for that. All right, Acts chapter 17, verses 16 through 31. And as usual, I'll just be kind of breaking it down as we go through. So just leave it open, or AV team, you can just have the passage up in the back, okay? All right, Acts 17, verse 16. Here we go. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply distressed when he saw that the city was full of idols. Full of idols. We'll pause right there. Has anyone ever been to Greece? Athens? Anyone? Huh. I feel like it's like a pretty cool place that people want to see. Maybe you guys could throw that into your bucket list. Take advantage of right now, because after college, you have to become like responsible adults, and you'll have to pay your own rent, make your own money and stuff, and it'll basically be impossible for you to like go on trips like this. So take advantage of now, where your parents have a lot more money than you will have in like your 20s, and you don't have to worry about rent and things like that, and you don't have too many responsibilities to take care of, like your own family or whatever. So just be like, hey, mom, dad, can we go here or there, right? I know you're kind of in a phase where you want to spend as little time with them as possible, but trust me, you will regret it. Coming from a former like worst son on the planet Earth, you will regret it. You'll regret not spending more time with them. And so, yeah, maybe you could throw this kind of into your bucket list of places you could possibly go with your family while you have the time. But imagine going to a historic place like Athens, right? Oldest city in Europe. Even at the time of Paul, in our passage today, this place was already 3,000 years old. Okay, it's a very old, historic place. I'm sure a lot of you know from your studies in school that this was the birthplace of Western civilization. This is the place where we got something as great as democracy that we'll be able to practice next month. Well, not you guys, but adults will be able to vote next month, right? But things like democracy, the arts, literature, some of the best literature that you read and get into in your English classes at school, kind of, birthed from this place. Philosophy, right? A lot of intellectual thinking. They're kind of leaving the barbaric age and becoming good, sound thinkers. Was born from a place like Athens. And you'll see symbolic sites here, like, can you guys name anything come to mind? Colosseum, right? You'll see things like the Parthenon, right? The Parthenon. And what would you think, right? Visiting such a historic place, seeing such historic ruins, what would your thoughts be? Right? What would you most be impressed by? Most likely, most of us would probably be busy taking pictures, taking a selfie in front of the Parthenon, uploading it to social media, letting people know that you've made it to an awesome place like this. But what was Paul's reaction coming to a place like this? You know that Paul had a healthy relationship. We talked about having a healthy relationship with what last week? Money, right? And you know Paul had a healthy relationship with the things of the world because above all the impressive things of being in this impressive place, the thing that he was most concerned about, the thing that he was initially concerned with was man's relationship with God. Right? The primary concern for Paul was like, oh, it's the Parthenon, right? I'm in Athens. No. Paul's immediate reaction was a heartbreak, a heartache over man's relationship with God. That man has allowed all these countless idols to get in the way between them and knowing God. Instead of being impressed by the worldly things, he's thinking about what inspired these buildings. What inspired man to build these marvelous things? It's their worship, it's their devotion, it's their faith in false gods and goddesses like Athena. Developing their whole identity around these false things instead of knowing the real God, instead of knowing the real Creator. And so, guys, even for us, if we're fostering the right relationship with God, then our hearts should also break over these things. Right? Not in a condemning way, but in an intercessory way. We've talked about this word before, maybe you forgot, but everyone say intercession. Right? Intercession is that special place where you get to be in between God and sinful humanity, right? That's that special place where Jesus was. That special place where Jesus absorbed the sins for sinful humanity and prayed on their behalf with God, right? We saw it most notably on the cross, right? What is the most evil thing that we've ever done in all of history? Was putting the Son of God, our Savior Messiah, on the cross, right? Giving him capital punishment. And on that cross, where Jesus was completely wronged, he had every reason to point his finger, say, these little, like to cuss us, like curse us. What did he say on the cross? Father, forgive them. He prayed for us. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And so intercession is that special place where we get to really know Christ, where we get to become like Christ. Place from where we should allow our hearts to break as well. When you go to school, when you hang out with your friends, wherever you go, you see the idolatry of the world. Your heart should break in this way, in an intercessory way, not a condemning way. I was in Virginia this week with my firstborn son, Hajin, and we're Marylanders, so we don't really know what's going on in Virginia. We were at this place, kind of funny name, this place called Big Buns. It's a really good burger shop, and we went in to get a burger, and then we did not know this was going to happen, but we came out, and the streets were completely shut down. Right, there was no way to leave the shopping center, completely shut down, and the streets were lined with like it really could have been hundreds of thousands of people, right? Like you guys know, like the when you have like football games at school, right? The like how like the seats will fill up and stuff. Like just imagine the street lined with like bleachers of people, okay? And what was happening was a Halloween parade. Right? And we had no idea this was going to happen. We just got stuck there, and we had to watch all these Halloween floats and things like go by, and things like that. And before you condemn my son, he's only 8 years old, okay, and he's been hearing like sermons from Pastor Kathy about Halloween and how we shouldn't practice that and celebrate that and take part in that. And so Hajin, his reaction was like, "Appa, we gotta get out of here. We have to leave. We gotta get out." And I'm like, Hajin, we can't leave. Like, the car is in this parking lot. The streets are blocked. We can't leave. He's like, Appa, we're going to go to hell. Like, we can't be here, right? These people are all going to hell. Like, we can't take part in this, And, he's in that place right now where it's still very black and white, right? Where it's heaven or hell. He's not at an age where he can have kind of more nuanced perspectives on things, right? But as we were stuck there and we had to kind of watch what was going on, I just could not help but wonder, where is this sort of enthusiasm for church? Right? Where is this sort of enthusiasm for God? Now, I was kind of getting on the praise team yesterday because they were singing like a secular song, like a non-worship song, and they were like getting into it, like just everybody was rocking out. I'm like, where's your enthusiasm for the worship songs, But I think that we should be wondering the same thing, guys. When we see what's going on in our own lives, in the lives around us, right? At school, maybe the pep rallies or whatever, the school dances, the sports, the functions, we should be wondering, where is this heart, this enthusiasm with God? right? Some of us are more intense watching Sunday football than worshiping God on a Sunday, right? We should be wondering these things. We need to make sure that we have things in right order. Because if you're practicing an intimate relationship with God, if you're praying for people regularly, if you're interceding for people on their behalf, because people are in sin and they're ignorant of what's going on, they're ignorant of the fact that they're very disconnected from God right now, somebody's got to come on their behalf and pray for them, right? And when you're stepping into that special place, that intercessory place, you will genuinely feel this heartache, this heartbreak that Paul felt. All right, verse 17. So from this heart, okay, from this place, Paul reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with those that worshiped God, as well as in the marketplace every day with those who happened to be there. Okay, so Paul is not just in the synagogues, but he's going out into the marketplace, okay? And, I'm not saying that we should avoid having these sorts of conversations and these sort of intellectual debates with people, but I want to make sure that you make sure that you're having these conversations with people from the right place, with the right heart, okay? Because if we do it in a condemning spirit, you're not helping anybody, right? If you're doing it from the wrong heart, ultimately you're making all Christians look bad, right? What are some of the names that people have for Christians? What do people call Christians? Huh? Homophobic? Bigots, yeah? Hypocrites? Right? Do we have a good reputation? No. And why is that? It's because we approach people, we approach these relationships and these conversations in a condemning spirit. And a lot of times, and I've been guilty of this as well, okay? So I'm not just preaching at you guys, I'm talking to me as well, right? But I'll go into these things with the right heart, with the right intention. Okay, yeah, I want to evangelize. I want to tell them about Jesus, right? I want to tell them about the truth. And you kind of go into it with the right heart. But midway through the conversation, you'll realize, oh my gosh, I did not pray about this enough before I got into this conversation, right? I have started this conversation with the wrong heart. And before you know it, you're in a full-blown argument. You're in a full-blown debate. And what happens at the end of it? Nothing good, right? You both part ways, angry, not happy, thinking very negative thoughts about each other, right? There's no fruit at all. But how do you know you're coming from the right heart, right? How do you know that you're approaching these conversations with the right heart? I think a good way to measure that, guys, is asking yourself, okay, am I getting offended? I think if we're getting offended by these conversations, then that shows that we don't have the right heart. And if we're getting offended, we should probably stop. We should probably disengage and develop the right heart in our prayer closets, right? In our intimate relationship with God, and make sure that we re-enter these conversations with the right heart. Because people without real arguments, right? When it's more emotional and it's not really a debate, right? It becomes more of just kind of preconceived notions you have about each other and stuff. What ends up happening is, I think I've mentioned this before, it's something called ad hominem attacks. Everyone say ad hominem attacks. Okay, this is the point in an argument, in a discussion, where you have no point anymore, and so you just resort to name calling. Right? You just resort to kind of like poking the other person's pride and trying to just make them feel bad about themselves because you don't really have an argument, right? And we get caught up in that a lot. Okay? But I really want to challenge all of us to not do that, to not continue doing that, because it's not going to bear any fruit, and it just makes us look bad, right? Okay, so Paul is out in the marketplace, the synagogues. He's everywhere. He's trying to have good conversations with people, okay? And not just that, but in verse 18 we see, some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also debated with him. Some said, what is this ignorant show-off trying to say? Okay, so these philosophers, some of them are saying about Paul, what is this ignorant show-off trying to say? Others replied, he seems to be a preacher of foreign deities or foreign gods, because he was telling the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Okay, anyone know what an Epicurean is? I'll be pretty impressed. Nobody? No? Okay, so these are basically the people that believe that the gods, they're like up in the heavens, just spending their times like enjoying like physical pleasures, right? So if you've seen like those old like paintings of the gods just like eating like delicious fruits and things like that, right? That's basically what they believe the gods are doing. So if we might as well imitate them, we might as well do the same thing. And so they just live their lives enjoying the physical pleasures, okay? And then you guys probably know, you have heard of the term Stoic or Stoicism, but they basically believe that the key to understanding universal truth, right, the key to coming to the truth in life is to overcome emotion with logic, right? So they basically believe like being emotional, like following your emotions, that's actually destructive, okay? That'll lead you away from the truth. And so they like to overcome emotion with logic, right? Just using sound logic and rationale, and a lot like Athena, practicing virtue while avoiding emotions, okay? And so they're very big on like self-control, okay? Controlling your emotions, just using sound thought, okay? So these are the people that are debating with Paul now. Verse 19, they took him and brought him to Areopagus and said, "May we learn about this new teaching you are presenting? Because what you say sounds strange to us, and we want to know what these things mean." Now all the Athenians and the foreigners residing there spent their time on nothing else but telling or hearing something new. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have heard of Areopagus before. Anyone know the other term for it? Okay, Mars Hill. Okay, everyone say Mars Hill. Okay, and this was literally a hill by the Acropolis, where the local leaders, they would meet to hold trials or to discuss and defend their philosophies, right? Their ideologies and the spiritual ideas that they live by and they think that society should live by. Okay, so it's very similar to the Sanhedrin for the Jewish people, right? But when Paul was approached by these very intellectual people, very smart people, okay, they're literally the intellectuals of the society here that people are dependent on, okay? Paul realized that as smart as they are, they're completely illiterate when it comes to the Bible. Right? They don't know anything about the Bible, the true and living God. And so what did he do? Instead of reasoning with them like he does with the Jews, because that's what Paul would do, he would first go to the Jews and he would just go into the Old Testament and the hundreds of different prophecies that Jesus perfectly filled, right? These the impossible odds of these like little details in the Old Testament about the coming Messiah and connecting that to Jesus and how he fulfilled that. Paul realizes, okay, these people aren't going to get that. They don't believe in the Old Testament. They don't know the Old Testament. So he can't reason with them in that way, in a biblical way. And so what does he do? He basically kind of dumbs it down without compromising. He sort of dumbs down the gospel message without compromising it, okay? And you'll see very clearly that Paul does not compromise, right? Even though he does his best to speak in a language that they can understand, he doesn't dumb down the truth, right? He's very straightforward with the truth, and we're going to see that, okay? So, verse 22. Paul stood in the middle of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that you're extremely religious in every respect," okay? He could have easily just started pointing his finger and, you guys are idiots, right? You worship these statues and these rocks and these man-made things. Like, how can God be limited to these man-made things? It makes absolutely no sense. And he could just start destroying their rationale. But instead of doing that, all right, instead of immediately closing the door to their hearts, because that would have just turned them off immediately. Like, man, okay, who's this guy? And they would have just kicked him out, right? He says, "I see that you're extremely religious in every respect. For as I was passing through and observing the objects of your worship, I even found an altar on which was inscribed." Okay, so this city would have just been filled with different altars and things, right? I think I've heard it said that there were like more altars, more idols than people in this town, okay? And so he finds one where it was inscribed, "To an unknown God." Okay, I found an altar on which was inscribed to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. Okay, so again, instead of spitfiring the Old Testament prophecies that they wouldn't have even been knowledgeable about, he appeals to something that he found in their culture. Paul did his research. He found something that they are aware of, that they are educated about, and he tried to appeal to that. Okay, so Paul really went out of his way to talk to them in a way that they'll understand. And so he finds this altar that they had inscribed on it to an unknown God, or agnostos theo. Okay, this is where we get agnostic from, the word agnostic, which is actually currently the most popular theology. Okay, it's not. We talked about this at the retreat. It's not atheism anymore, right? It's the agnostic way of thinking that, okay, there's got to be something out there. Okay, it makes absolutely no logical sense that there wasn't a beginning, right? Because for anything to come into existence, there has to be a start, a beginning, right? And so, popular thought right now is that there has to be something out there. There has to be a higher power, but what is it? We don't know. Okay, so that's the agnostic thinking. Okay, and so Paul's appealing to that right now. Okay, verse 24: the God who made the world and everything in it, He is Lord of heaven and earth. He does not live in shrines made by hands. Okay. Neither is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath and all things. From one man he has made every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this so that they might seek God, and perhaps they might reach out and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, and even some of our own poets have said, again, he's appealing to things that they're knowledgeable about, for we are also his offspring. Okay, so he's appealing to poems that they're aware of, okay? For we are also his offspring. Since then we are God's offspring, we shouldn't think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image fashioned by human art and imagination. Okay, so we shouldn't be worshiping nature, created things that even God created or that humans have created. We should be worshiping the Creator, okay, the one that has caused all this to come into existence. Right? If God is God, then how can he be limited to our human limitations, our human hands? This is the argument that Paul is making, right? We are created. Okay, so we should be worshiping the Creator, not created things. Right? Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, okay, you're in a time of ignorance. Okay? You were not aware of these things. Okay, but God overlooked that. Okay, but God now commands all people everywhere to repent, to turn away from that ignorance, turn away from the sins. Okay. Because he has set a day when he is going to judge the world in righteousness by the man he has appointed. He has provided proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. When they heard about the resurrection of the dead, some began to ridicule him, but others said, okay, so guys, the ridicule is unavoidable. It will happen, okay? Again, I said a good way to measure whether you have the right heart or not is whether you get offended or not. But that doesn't mean that other people won't get offended. Okay, I'm saying if other people get offended, then you should stop. I'm not saying that. Okay, I'm saying if you're getting offended, you should stop. But other people will get offended. It will happen. The ridicule will happen. Okay? Some began to ridicule him, but when you're doing it from the right heart, this is what happens, okay? Others said, hey, we want to hear more. We'd like to hear from you again about this. So Paul left their presence. However, some people joined him and believed. Everyone say some believed. Including Dionysius and, I can't pronounce this, Areopagite, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Okay, so here's my question for us today. Where's your Mars Hill? Where's your Areopagus? Where is that place where you can meet people who are Bible illiterate? You know, I think a lot of times Christians, we can fall into the trap of like using a language that we've become familiar with because we grew up in the church. But a lot of times we fail to realize, okay, a lot of these people, they didn't grow up in the church. They didn't have exposure to all this. They don't get a sermon every week like I do. They don't get to learn these words like I do. Right, so where is that place where you can meet people like this, where you can tell them the truth, lead them to God? But we have to do it in grace, guys. In grace. We have to reason with grace. We have to have conversations in grace. We can have debates, but in grace. Because when it's in grace, some will believe. Some will be drawn to more. Some will become more curious. Some will want to have a second conversation, a third conversation. Some will want to talk more about it. There will be some fruit. Yes, some will ridicule you. Some will call you names. Some will want you out of their sight. Some will want you to shut up and just, hey, let's just hang out. Like, why are we talking about this? Why do you always have to talk about God? Why you always got to bring that up, right? But some will be drawn to it. There will be some fruit, okay? And so what I really want us to think about today is, and I think you guys can all do that, right? I think all of you can name some people. All of you can name your Mars Hill. All of you can think of that place with the certain people that you can have these conversations with. But I want us to develop the right heart before we go into those places, before we have those conversations, right? And some of us, thank God, we already have those relationships. We already have that everyone say trust bridge. There's got to be a trust bridge, right? If someone doesn't trust you, then you can't have that conversation because they're gonna be opposed to everything you say, right? But when we build those trust bridges, we can start having those conversations. And some of you already have those trust bridges with unbelieving people, people that are on Mars Hill, right? But when we allow those conversations, when we approach those conversations, are you coming from the right place? Do you have the right heart? Are you coming from a place of intercession where you've been praying for this person, developing the right heart for that person, where you're not going to get offended by anything they say, right? You're not going to get all worked up and ticked off by the things that are said, right? It's not going to get, they might get emotional, but you're not going to get overly emotional. And you can just be that person that they can go to. You can be like the Paul for the people here on Mars Hill, where they can have these conversations with you, and you can give them what you know. Give them what you know, the knowledge that you know, the knowledge that you've acquired through your relationship with God. All right, so can we just bow our heads?